Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. We're live on 99.5 ESPN Radio in Emporia, Kansas. Emporia's only 24-hour sports station. Studio line to call in at 620-343-6143. That's 620-343-6143. Again, that's 620-343-6143. We're talking Barry Sanders on Throwback Thursday. I'm going to give this to you one more time, and I'm going to narrow it down even more. In 2018, Barry Sanders tells the Detroit Lions he wants out of his contract, and he's willing to pay the money on his signing bonus, $1.83 million. The Detroit Lions refuse. So in 1999, before camp begins, Barry Sanders announces to the public that he is done with the game of football. The Lions then sue him and take him to arbitrary court. Barry Sanders is ordered to owe $1.83 million, and he is also not allowed to come back to the game of football unless he plays for the Detroit Lions. Barry Sanders offers $5.5 million to the Detroit Lions to get out of his contract and be traded or released or whatever it is that they got to do to let him go. The Lions adamantly refuse. Again, the quote from then CEO Chuck Schmidt: "We would welcome him back as a Detroit Lion should he voice to us his desire to return to active duty in the NFL. Until then, we hold him accountable to the conditions put forth by the arbitrator in this case." End quote. That is a cold-blooded statement, man. Does it get any more cold-blooded than that? I mean, that's deep, guys. That is seriously deep right there. He's not talking as if he is somebody who's relating to an audience. He's not talking as somebody who's, inviting Barry Sanders back or anybody else. This guy is talking like he is a drill sergeant or a lawyer himself or whatever position of authority you can think of in law. I mean, this is a very direct message. Think about this quote for a minute. "We would welcome him back as a Detroit Lion should he voice to us his desire to return to active duty in the NFL." Man, this ain't the military, bro. Here's the rest of it. "Until then, we hold him accountable to the conditions put forth by the arbitrator in this case." That's cold-blooded. There's no remorse in that statement. And to me, that's not even a welcome back. That's not an invite back. That's really not what that is. That is you don't want to be here. Fine. We don't want you here, really. Because the very same person who said that took $1.75 million out of a check that was sent to Barry Sanders for his bonus. So they basically had already all but charged him the full $1.8 million. After everything Barry Sanders did for that organization, he basically got a swift kick out the door. I mean, really, when you think about it, that's exactly what happened. And if Barry, what he says is true about those guys not wanting to get other players to come to that team, then basically they were just leaning on this dude's legs to carry them throughout everything that they needed to do, and everything else was just kind of like, whatever. He's a really good cash cow. He sells a lot of jerseys. He's a human highlight reel. He gives the Detroit Lions a lot of attention. What do we really need anybody else for? We got Barry. You think they were going to let their quote, basically what is a prize bull at this point, to anybody else to actually win a title? Because then that just makes them look even worse. And believe it or not, you can look worse in this situation. It doesn't seem like you can, but you absolutely can. "10 years in this league, and they give Barry Sanders 10 days to either come back or they're going to go after him for an additional $1.83 million, and that is exactly what happened. They'd already taken $1.75 from him. And then when Barry didn't come back to the team, they said, well, no, dude, you're going to pay back the whole thing. Now, we don't want just that $80,000. We want the other $1.83 million. We're getting all that back from you. I mean, how greedy could the Detroit Lions have possibly been during this situation? No, we're not going to let the best running back in the NFL go. No, we're not going to let him go to another team. He's only going to play for us. And by the way, all that money, we're going to need that back too, partner. Thanks for all your time, Barry. Appreciate all your services, amigo. We will see you back in the NFL in Neverdom. That is callous to a guy who gave you everything that he had on that football field every single game. And Barry is even quoted as saying that it was getting harder and harder for him, that he was losing his passion. Dealing with these sorts of things, can you imagine? I mean, you know, when you really start to think about it, Barry Sanders couldn't have been alone here. And what's amazing to me is how one player can mean so much to one team and one town and really give you that inspiration that every single season when the new year starts, you think to yourself, we have this guy, we have hope. And for an organization to look at that and go, oh, that's nice that you all think that. But really for us, we just see dollar signs. Because that is essentially what this entire situation boiled down to for Barry Sanders. Dollar signs. That's it. Money talks, dude. And they let the money do all the talking on their way to sending Barry Sanders right on out that door with zero remorse about it. I mean, they didn't act like this was a difficult decision or nothing. They just said, all right, bro, this is how you want to play the game. We're going to play it right back, and we guarantee you we will win. And when we do, we are going to get everything out of you that we possibly can, even though he had already given them everything that he possibly could. Barry was willing to pay basically double the amount? Because really, when you think about it, you know, you're looking at $2 million, you're looking at roughly $2.5–3 million, and Barry's willing to give you an additional $2.5 million just so that way he can go somewhere else. If you didn't like the fact that Barry Sanders was unhappy and you knew about it for a full year and you went into the NFL draft and you did all these things, I mean, I don't understand it. Now, here's the thing. Yesterday I said that I don't believe that athletes have the right to tell organizations exactly what kind of personnel should be there and that be their final word. And I still believe that. And I support that decision. But I do agree that they could have input and suggestions about who they think might be a really good fit. But that doesn't mean, though, that coaches and executives should lean exclusively on those feelings. But in the case of Barry Sanders, of 10 years of having quarterbacks that were how good again? I mean, really think about that for just a second. The guys that were handing Barry Sanders the football. How good were those quarterbacks really? It had to have been one of the hardest things to ever witness as a fan of Barry, as a fan of the Lions, as a person who's from Kansas and knowing that he is from Wichita. And it is the ugly side of sports. People talk about it now, and it's become kind of a common conversation. You know, we see it now with Des Bryant. We see it now with Calvin Johnson. We see it now with Jordy Nelson. There's a host of players. Peyton Manning, the way he got shoved out the back door in Indianapolis. There are a lot of players that you look at it and you go, how can it be this way? But it is. There's an ugly side to everything. I love radio, but there's an ugly side to journalism. And it's one that I work very, very hard to try and stay away from. there are things about any business that are ugly no matter how much you love your job. And Barry Sanders could not be more of a poster child for that ugly side than he is. I mean, seriously, if you look up the ugly side of the NFL, as the saying goes, there should be a picture of Barry Sanders right next to it. You know, and they tell you that so-and-so is the very definition of this, and when you look it up in the dictionary, it's your picture next to it. It should be Barry Sanders right next to that. It should be the very first thing that gets mentioned. But I will say this. A lot of the young athletes now that are in this game have learned from watching things like this happen. And because they have seen this happen, they have learned to protect themselves very well. And Le'Veon Bell is a perfect example of a guy who has worked extremely hard to protect himself. And this is why I don't have any bones about it. Look, I am a player's guy almost all the way. And it's because of this. Look, I know that there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of old school mentalities. And I agree with some of them. You know, the game is still physical. It's more physical than I think people realize that it is. Yeah, sure, there are old images of guys like Dick Butkus and some others that, you know, are playing with bloody noses and, you know, there's tape all around their fingers. Well, we still see to this day guys playing with casts, big knee braces. I mean, these guys give it all that they've got now. The game is not that much different in that regard. It's just much more publicized now when somebody can't play. You know, me and a coworker earlier, we were talking about, you know, guys, you know, allegedly, you know, drinking before games and, you know, it's just a real mess in the locker room. Well, there's rumors about Kenny Stabler allegedly taking shots of whiskey while he was in the huddle during games. The players have seen all of these things go on in sports, and they have gotten wiser and wiser and wiser to it. And that's one of the things that I want to believe that in my line of work, because we've talked about it and brought it up so many times and exposed it so many times, that these players have learned ways to protect themselves. I want to believe that David Ware, Barry Sanders' agent, did everything that was right by Barry Sanders that he possibly could. I mean, this is a nightmare when you really think about it. This is the truly ugly side of sports. And I do feel bad for Barry Sanders. Did he make a choice to retire? Absolutely he did. But if you're not happy somewhere, do you stay at your job when you're not happy? How many of us know that person that has worked like 25 jobs this year? You know what I mean? It's like, where else could you possibly go? You're running out of work, man. You're going to have to move. You're going to have to go to like L.A. or New York or somewhere so you can find a job because you've worked everywhere. We all know that person. And a lot of times they leave because they're just not happy where they are. Barry wasn't happy in Detroit. And I think he dealt with it for as long as he possibly could. And he decided to leave. You know, every year that they would make the playoffs, it was always on his back. Remember that season that he had all those big rushing yards and the Lions finished 11-5 and, you know, the Green Bay Packers just knew how to play against him defensively. And so in the playoffs, teams started using that moniker to shut down Barry Sanders. You can only do so much as a one-man show, especially at the running back position, because the ball can only be in your hands so many times before you're just out of steam, man. It's physical being a running back. You are hit every time you touch the ball. Every single time. I mean, you know, the old adage is that Barry Sanders had the greatest yards for or plays for a loss of any running back you've ever seen. He could lose 5 yards and it was still entertaining to watch him. That's how good he was, and that's how bad that offensive line was for Barry Sanders and the Detroit Lions. You're listening to 99.5 ESPN Radio in Emporia, Kansas. This is the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. 620-343-6143. That's 620-343-6143. 343-6143. I want to know what you think about Barry Sanders in this situation. What's on your mind? Again, that's 620-343-6143. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. A couple little quick final thoughts on this. Number one, Barry Sanders to me is the greatest running back to ever play the game of football. And you were talking to a Syracuse guy, and I love Jim Brown. I love Ernie Davis. I love Floyd Little, Larry Zonka. With all due respect to the late, great Walter Payton, and with all due respect to Emmitt Smith, who is also quoted as saying that Barry Sanders is the greatest running back ever. I love Adrian Peterson. Kareem Hunt's got a really bright future in front of him. Marshall Faulk was an all-time great. Curtis Martin is a name that is never mentioned, and I love watching Curtis Martin. One of the all-time leading rushers is Curtis Martin. With all due respect to all of those guys, Barry Sanders to me is the greatest running back to ever play this game. The second thing I want to finish with is when you see these kinds of things, when you see these kinds of contractual things, does it alter your opinion whatsoever when you see these athletes who basically go after the highest bidder and try to get their dollars up? Because you never know when it is going to end or how it is going to end. We always think it's injury, but that is not always the case, as you can blatantly see with guys like Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders who are not being released from their contracts. Maybe the Dallas Cowboys did Des Bryant a real big service. Maybe the Green Bay Packers did Jordy Nelson a real big service. This is the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. You can also call in at 620-343-6143. That's 620-343-6143. We are live on 99.5 ESPN, Emporia's only 24-hour sports station. I want to know what you think about this situation with Barry Sanders. It is Throwback Thursday on the Full Court Press. You can talk to me about any of your favorite sports moments, something from when you were, in high school or, in your collegiate days, a big college play that you remember, a big game that you remember, maybe an underrated player or athlete that you may remember. I want to know. 620-343-6143. That's 620-343-6143. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan 83. This is the Full Court Press. I am your host, Drew Duncan. We're live on 99.5 ESPN Radio in Emporia, Kansas. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back on the flip side, I went ahead and decided that later on we will do for Throwback Thursday John Elway. But we're going to get into some other things first, though. Because speaking of careers that ended maybe a little too short, Corey Brandon, in a very telling article from the Huffington Post, really revealed a lot about his time with the Oklahoma Sooners. He was an offensive lineman from 2006 to 2011. We will be discussing that coming up next. This is the Full Court Press. We'll be back right after this. Don't you dare touch that dial.